We are joined now by Dr. David Chao at Pro Football Doc. You can follow him on Twitter there. And first off, we've been talking a lot during the course of the program, Dr. Chao, about Nick Saban testing positive for COVID and whether he might try and be involved in coaching the game, even though he's not allowed to be physically present. What do you think from a coach perspective? We've had Florida State coach Mike Norvell test positive. Nick Saban is by far the most common coach, most well-known, I should say, coach to test positive during the season so far. But we asked the question, I can't even remember a coach not coaching a football game during the regular season. When you were the team doctor for the San Diego Chargers, were there ever situations where the coaches were so sick that you remember them not being on the sideline? Or was it basically understood that during the regular season they were pretty much going to be there no matter what?
I think that's the football mentality, right? I mean, you're going to be there no matter what. I mean, I remember one time Coach Norv Turner had an emergency appendectomy on Friday and coached on Sunday. And it even extended, not trying to talk about me, but I remember I had a neck surgery fusion and flew with the team 3 days later to Australia for the preseason game because, preseason and training camp was still going on. That's the mentality. You expect players to play through stuff and coaches set the tone and tempo. And, think about this. Forget Nick Saban, and hopefully Nick Saban will be fine. But Ron Rivera's coaching has cancer right now.
Yes.
He's undergoing chemotherapy and is coaching through.
When you mentioned like Norv Turner, for instance, having an appendectomy on Friday and coaching on Sunday, was he on the sideline? Was he in the press box? What was the situation there?
Oh, he was on the sideline.
I mean, that's pretty crazy, right? I had an appendectomy. I mean, most people would not be back at full work 2 days later.
Well, I actually probably should have rechecked with Norv, in terms of if he wanted that story out there. But sorry, Coach, he's in San Diego.
But, I mean, it's emblematic of what the larger storyline is. I mean, Ron Rivera this year has been public with the fact that he has cancer. I mean, he's literally sometimes being treated for cancer-related issues associated with his chemotherapy during halftime, right? I mean, I've seen some headlines and stories about that. But is there any doubt that if Nick Saban had, for instance, the flu, first of all, that he would have never told anybody, and second, that he would have been on the sideline for a game as big as Georgia?
Yeah, if he had, if this were 2019 and he had influenza, he'd be there, right? I mean,
and sorry to cut you off, Doc, but if he had the flu and he wasn't there on the sideline, fans would be like, man, what in the world's up with Nick Saban? Why isn't he coaching with the flu?
Well, I think we talked about a little bit this summer when the Last Dance era.
Yeah, the Jordan flu game, yeah.
That's not going to ever happen anymore. The Jordan flu game isn't there anymore because of the worry and the restrictions. And on a related note for fans, if you really look at all the injury reports this year and the practice reports, there's a lot more illness on there.
Yeah.
And for fans, it's not that teams are trying to hide COVID. It's that in the past, if you got a cold or the flu, you stayed in the building and maybe you were limited practice, unless you were really contagious with something. Now, if you have a temperature, you have any illness, you are sent home and you're not even there in the facility. So now they have to be accounted for differently on the injury report. They're DNP, they weren't even at the facility, and illness. So you'll notice that a lot more. You already see it, but you'll notice a lot more as flu season rolls around.
So the Titans played on Tuesday night. They have had the biggest outbreak of any team so far. They are starting to bring back all of the guys that have tested positive, but they played very, very well. What is the guys who were not positive, what is the shortest amount of time that you have seen that somebody can go from testing positive for COVID to testing negative and being back and able to play? Because it looks like there's a decent chance that all of the Titans that tested positive are going to be back to play against the Texans, meaning that the way it ends up working out, nobody will miss more than one game.
That's about right. Right now, depending on when you test positive, you're going to miss about one game. Now, Cam Newton, in theory, could have missed two, right? Because the Chiefs game, but then they got the schedule change and the bye for the Denver game. Otherwise, he would have missed it. But he's now going to play. So it's about 10 or so days from when you test positive, 10 days plus one. So a little under 2 weeks. So it depends on the timing.
So
if you
Cam
test positive, early week, you're going to miss one game. Late week, you're going to miss two.
So Cam Newton tests positive, and it appears other than Stephon Gilmore, there isn't anybody that's been directly traced back to him to potentially have been positive. That means, in theory, that maybe the Patriots have done a good job of kind of clamping this thing down, right? If you want to think about the positive and how it spreads, that the Cam positive test did not really lead to any outbreak, and we previously have seen, I believe it was one of the defensive backs for the Atlanta Falcons tested positive, and that didn't really spread anywhere else either.
Well, that's been the norm, that when there have been singular positives, even when they're proven to be true positives, there hasn't been spread. The Patriots, though, I don't know how they counted close contacts, but one could argue that it didn't spread except for Stephon Gilmore having dinner with Cam Newton. But there were 20 people on a different plane that were labeled close contacts. And really, and we've written about this at Outkick, to be proactive rather than reactive, there should be no close contacts.
Right.
And this way you don't have spread for sure.
What is standing out to you as the NFL has had to obviously start to reconfigure their schedule in a big way? Do you think the NFL is going to have to add that sort of 18th week to the season before all is said and done?
Well, I actually do, and I think it's inevitable. Remember, flu season is still coming, and is there going to be a new rise in COVID cases? Nobody knows, but there is that risk. But right now, the schedule makers have worked a lot of magic. There were 8 changes, right? 4 Charger games were changed to make this most recent round of things work. How many times can they pull a rabbit out of a hat? If this happens again, do they really have room? And as bye weeks are already eaten up, there's no more room to move or maneuver. And it's not like baseball where you can play a doubleheader. So I think that you're going to run out of room, and then you can't just say you're not going to play the game, because they're going to say, well, you hooked up the Titans, you hooked up the Patriots. Well, what about us? Just for competitive balance. So I think with the season being this young, the likelihood is an 18th week or more.
It seems also that the idea of punishing teams has taken a turn in the direction of that not happening, even in the wake of the Titan outbreak and the fact that they've gotten things back on schedule in some way if the Titans play Sunday. In general, do you think that the NFL is going to lean against extreme punitive action in regards to these, just because it's so difficult to prove exactly where somebody might have been exposed?
Well, yeah, that's true. But, really what it gets down to is if there's blatant disregard for the rules. Like, everyone knows the rules are ever changing and they're difficult. And it's one thing if you're going down the highway and going 70. It's another if you're going 120, And, the Titans so far, they certainly were, quote, speeding. They didn't do everything right. But the NFL seems to be either protecting them or saying, hey, look, they weren't perfect, but there wasn't willful disregard.
What else? Okay, so we talked a lot about COVID here with the Cam story and with the Titans and everything else. What else is standing out to you as we get forward and get close to kickoff? There's no Thursday night game this week, so it would be into the weekend, the Sunday or the Monday.
Well, what's standing out is how beat up the offensive lines are around the league. You look at the Eagles and they're decimated, especially now with Lane Johnson. So 4 out of 5 spots, and Jason Kelsey has a hip issue. The Cowboys' offensive line is decimated with both tackles in the center and the left guard, Connor Williams, still recovering from an ACL. And now you look at the Steelers. Zach Banner's already out with an ACL. David DeCastro with abdomen. His backup, Wisniewski's already been out. And Mike Pouncey now with the foot is in question. So the whole right side of the line. And that seems to be the hardest hit area around the league. Even the Jets throw them in, and obviously that affects a lot of games.
We appreciate the time. Encourage everybody to go read everything that Dr. Chao has at Pro Football Doc on Twitter and also at Outkick.com, as well as Pro Football, a website that he runs as well. Thanks, my man.
Thank you.